Coming up, a potential problem for Alabama and a potential opportunity for Florida. We'll talk about it all next, right here on SEC Country Live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to SEC Country Live. My name is Brandon Adams. This is the former Alabama All-American Mike Johnson. We're glad to have you with us. We talk about the SEC for the next hour, and I guess today, does it become official? Is everybody practicing now?
I think so,
It seems like our last holdouts may have been Alabama and Georgia. As we told you yesterday, they were going to kick things off today, and now they're off and running, so we can officially say this is the first day of spring, too, right?
Yeah, it is the first day of spring. I think everybody's lined up to kind of at least finish up by that April 21st. I think it's G-Day and Eddie the same day.
I said this on Dog Nation Daily this morning that I'm in a great mood about all of this. I hate winter. I love spring, and the fact that you got all 14 schools practicing now, at least I think you do. All 14 schools practicing now. The official calendar is now switched over to springtime. That's all good news for me.
Yeah, it's definitely some good news. And by the way, there was some tough weather went through Alabama and the state of Georgia last night. I hope everybody out there stayed safe.
Yeah, absolutely. That's not good news, but we're glad you're with us here today. We're going to run through a bunch of SEC stuff. We'll call it our first and 10. It's all the big news happening around the SEC. And we'll start with item number one. And I've told you this a million times, and I hate to keep harping on this, but I firmly believe this is true. Lane Kiffin continues to be a problem for Alabama. Let me give you the latest reason why. The other day, Clay Travis, who some of y'all know, some of you like, some of you don't. The point is not Clay Travis here. He sort of spouts off on Twitter about Virginia's basketball team. This is before they got upset. He says, I rescind my criticism of Auburn-Charleston, essentially saying that was a bad game. Virginia, Maryland, Baltimore County's brutal. Can y'all remember the top team in a sport that was this boring to watch? Virginia was obviously a very good team, but they run one of the most sort of boring offenses you can imagine. It's essentially supposed to be a rhetorical question. I don't know that he's necessarily fishing for answers there, but FAU coach and former Alabama offensive coordinator Lane Kiffin took this as an opportunity to say, He gives you the same sideways laughing emoji that other coaches have kind of gotten in trouble for using here a little bit over the last couple of days. I take that as have you seen how boring Alabama has been since I've left and how boring Nick Saban's tendencies are? This in itself is not a big deal. This is just Kiffin having some fun. But it shows you once again what I've said all along. Kiffin is a publicity hound. He uses anything he can to get attention. And there's no better springboard for his attention than the place where he used to work, Alabama. He's like the ombudsman, if you will, for Alabama football. If Alabama's boring, if it veers into bad territory under Mike Locksley this year, Kiffin's going to be there again to tweet about it. This is, I can't stand being this right.
Yeah, I can't stand you being that wrong. Sitting across the table from me. This reminds me of like going on a camping trip and you got that gnat around you. This is what Nick Saban's doing right now. Like this gnat around his little ear, buzzing in his ear. That's what he's trying to get rid of Lane Kiffin right now. This is not a problem for anybody in the state of Alabama. This is not a problem for Nick Saban. This isn't a problem for Michael Locksley. It's not like Lane Kiffin was fired. Lane Kiffin moved on to take over his own program. He's got his own problem down there. They play Oklahoma this year. They got a tough conference slate in on themselves. Michael Locksley's offense is loaded. They're not going to have problems doing anything this year. Their offensive line is loaded. The running back core is loaded. They got two good quarterbacks. The wide receivers are incredible. Michael Locksley's dealing with a full toolbox, and it's going to be exciting to watch that offense.
What you're explaining to me right now is why it should work. What I'm telling you is since Lane Kiffin left Alabama, we've seen some curious choices from Nick Saban. I think it was a wrong choice to make Steve Sarkisian his play caller for the national championship game a year ago. I believe it cost him the game. Choosing the wrong quarterback in 2017 almost cost him a national championship. It wasn't until his back was against the wall in a sense of desperation that he actually played the quarterback that he should have been playing all season long. So it's not like this is a autopilot situation. This is not one of those deals where the Alabama offense is guaranteed to do well. Saban's own decisions, I think, have hurt the Alabama offense. What I'm telling you is, if another misstep comes in 2018, if Saban makes another bad choice, Kiffin's going to tweet about it, and it's going to be the kind of thing that people are going to notice. He likes using this kind of stuff.
Yeah, but what if he does? Like, what if Nick Saban makes a bad choice? What if for some reason they lose to Auburn this year, they lose the SEC championship game, they don't make it as far as they want to in the playoffs? Nobody's going to be worried about it except for Lane Kiffin. I mean, obviously, Alabama fans want Alabama to go as far, but you're still talking about the reigning national champions. You're still talking about 5 out of the last 9 national champions. This is not a problem for Nick Saban. I'm telling you, this is a gnat on Nick Saban's ear. This is Nick Saban trying to get rid of it. Maybe I understand your point about looking at Michael Locksley. What if the offense sputters? What if things don't come together? Listen, there's enough minds in that room. They added another guy today that was supposed to be the offense coordinator for the Indianapolis Colts. There's enough minds in that room where somebody is going to be able to get it done. It's not going to be on Michael Locksley. So I understand what you're saying. Lane Kiffin is just so far out of the picture, though, for this program. I don't even understand why anybody would be reading his tweets at this point.
Jeremy Pettis in the comment section says, do you get a ring for not having boring offenses? Obviously, he's referencing the fact that Alabama's wearing the national championship ring for this season. Here's all I'm going to say, and you can tell me I'm wrong a year from now, or I'll tell you you're wrong a year from now. Your assumption that Alabama fans are going to be patient and calm if there were to be an offensive misstep in 2018, the only way you can assume that is because they appear to be patient and calm right now. But they only appear that way because of the reigning national champions. This is not even a picking on Alabama thing. All SEC fan bases are this way. There is a little bit of a panic that steps in, and there's a blame game tendency that emerges when things do not go well. Right now, of course, everybody's got great faith and trust in Nick Saban. Whatever offensive coordinator he picks is going to be fine until Alabama goes 10-2. And if the offense is the reason why, and if Kiffin's on Twitter saying, see, I told you so, at that point in time, Alabama fans are going to voice their frustration. And I would not put it past Kiffin to sort of stir the pot on that a little bit and kind of kick up that hornet's nest.
Well, here's the problem with him already saying what he said, because he's calling last year's team already like they're not very fun to watch, kind of boring to watch. That's a team that scored 40 points in, I think, half their games last year. 7 games, they scored 40 points or more. This is a team who a lot of people said was handcuffed by Jalen Hurts, averaging more than 40 points. Listen, if winning all your games except one that's boring brand of football, I think everybody in the SEC wants a boring brand of football. So Lane Kiffin can say whatever he wants to about it. Bama's going to continue to win games, and Lane Kiffin's got his own work cut out for him down in South Florida.
Couple comments here. Joy Stripling says, get him, BA. That's typical Lane Kiffin. All Kiffin's saying is Saban's doing the same old, same old. And it's that last part of that line about Saban doing the same old, same old. That's the reason why Lane Kiffin was hired in the first place. And this is Lane Kiffin's own attempt at brand building here, because he knows his biggest claim to fame is that when Saban saw his grip on college football slipping before the 2014 season, when he knew he had to sort of get with the times, it's Lane Kiffin that he brought in. You can't deny that.
They're the same old though, BA. The same old is they're the reigning national champions. That's my point. That's the same old is an offense and a defense that has worked for the last 10 years.
But go back to 2013 for a second.
Well, I know. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. Listen.
In 2013, they lost 2 of the last 4 to Auburn. This was not a team that was necessarily standing head and shoulders above everybody else on top of college football or the SEC after the 2013 season. That's why Kiffin was brought in.
The offense under Kiffin and Nick Saban, that was the best Alabama's offense has looked when Lane Kiffin was in Tuscaloosa. So I'll give you that. But that's also the best Lane Kiffin's coaching career has looked when he was in Alabama with Nick Saban. So he can cast all the stones he wants to. He can stir the pot he wants to. All I'm telling you is that nobody in Tuscaloosa really cares if Lane Kiffin thinks it's boring.
I like Teresa Stewart's comment. She's a Tennessee fan. She says Kiffin's been a problem for everyone from time to time, and Tennessee fans certainly know that. Jerry Farmer says Alabama has problems being in the championship every year. What good problems to have. Kiffin is a watch me, listen to me maniac. But listen, you're the one that let him into your house. All of a sudden now, that watch me, listen to me maniac, he sort of knows where you live again. When he starts knocking on that door again, it's going to be a little bit of a problem there. But we'll take a lot more of your comments on this throughout the program. We'll check in on YouTube here in a moment as well. Let me do item number 2 for a moment, though, on our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. And this is one of those things that yesterday we were so full, we didn't have a chance to get the story in, although I did want to talk about it. I had planned on talking about it today. Some folks in the comment section started talking about it yesterday, which is that Florida picks up a preferred walk-on over the weekend. It's Umstead Sanders here, who on social media will show you his tweet to say he's blessed to be a part of the Gators, hashtag God's plan, hashtag 10 go live. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe that's a reference to his own jersey number. Hashtag Gator Nation, hashtag Molinera. I'm not sure what that is either.
It's supposed to be Molinera.
What is the... Oh! You know what? I've misspelled words before, too. I'm going to leave that alone.
Swing and a miss.
Okay, you're right. It is supposed to be Molinera, but listen, I've misspelled words before, too. Here's the thing, though. What makes Umstead Anders interesting, though, here is that he's not only a preferred walk-on that may have a chance to contribute for Florida, certainly be a tough body to deal with during practice. He also happens to be the brother of the nation's #1 running back for 2019, Trey Sanders from IMG Academy. Does the connection of the preferred walk-on here means that Florida is now in better shape for Trey Sanders? Well, Zach Abolverdi, who covers Florida recruiting for SECCountry.com, recently weighed in on that. He says his decision doesn't make Trey Sanders a lock for the Gators, but it certainly helps their chances. They already have the approval of his mother, who grew up a Florida fan and still loves the team. So you offer the brother the preferred walk-on spot in order to increase the favor of the #1 running back for 2019. You like this move by Florida?
I think it's great. I mean, I really do. I think it's great. I think you see other guys do this and other coaches do this, and they'll go in and offer a teammate, offer a high school teammate, or listen. This is a no-lose policy for I think his name's Sanders.
Yeah.
There's nothing that could possibly go wrong with this. You bring this guy in, Trey Sanders, #1 running back. This is a one-time Alabama commit. Then he backs off his commitment in Alabama and says Bama's still his favorite. Then he backs off that statement and says, you know what, everybody's even. I just want to kind of coast things out. This is a guy who's being recruited by Georgia, recruited by Alabama, by Florida, FSU, Texas, Miami. Everybody wants his kid, and I think Dan Mullen just pulled a rabbit out of his hat and gave Florida a one-up in this whole recruiting.
Now, I like this for two reasons. A, I think that the whole walk-on program is the kind of thing that good programs exploit. I'm a big believer that there are things that the NCAA restricts. You can't have more than 10 coaches. You can't sign more than 25 in a year. You can't have more than 85 players at any one time. So there's only so much exploitation you can do within the rules and the things that the NCAA restricts. But on the things that are not restricted, and for the most part the walk-on deal is not restricted, you got to find good walk-ons. And so Sanders may be an example of a good walk-on. Plus, it's a chance to curry favor with Trey Sanders without having to use a scholarship. Here's where I draw the line. For my own favorite team, for any other team, do not offer somebody a scholarship in order to get favor with an elite player. So don't go say, I'm going to take, Sanders or one of Trey Sanders' high school teammates who may only be a 3-star player. Don't offer that guy a scholarship in order to get the 5-star player. But if you can win the 5-star with bringing on a walk-on, do that every day of the week because that's good roster management.
And I'm telling you, it's so smart by Dan Mullen. And obviously, I'm sure that maybe there was some other team that looked at doing this, but Dan Mullen's the one that's able to land him. Obviously, you talk about the mom being the Florida fan. I think this is perfect. And you mentioned it. Listen, I had teammates that were offered because maybe somebody else was offered, and those guys land on, they don't do anything for 3 or 4 years, and then they're out of the program, and you've been out of scholarship spot. And so I think it's awesome to look at what Dan Mullen's doing. And we talk about roster management. Don't we talk about ability to bring these guys in, bring those guys in. We talked last week, actually, when you weren't here, about how it's for some schools it's tough to get these good scout team, practice squad type of players or guys that can push for playing time. They brought him in, gave him a preferred walk-on, and you said, you know what, it's somewhere down the road we might give you a scholarship. And I think that is the best thing you could have possibly done.
I'm going to butcher this quote, but the brand new Nebraska coach, Scott Frost. Now, Nebraska has a history, a heritage of walk-on players. They've used those kind of guys a lot. But he said something to the effect of he wanted a roster of like 150 guys. He wanted as many walk-ons as he could bring on, and that makes all the sense in the world. I mean, y'all know I'm a Georgia fan. I can tell you that a big part of Georgia's success in 2017, one of the reasons why it got to the college football playoff, they had a really good walk-on quarterback. They had wide receivers who were redshirting but playing a lot on scout team every day. Alabama's been doing this for a long time. The best teams have the best scout teams too. I mean, that's not a coincidence.
Yeah, it's really not. I mean, that pipeline from like Hoover High School down to Alabama and down to Auburn, you always got those great walk-ons that have been in good programs. And every state I feel like does this. You bring these guys in and they're able to really kind of listen. In our locker room in Alabama, we had 140 lockers. It's like, how can you even have 140 numbers? Those duplicate numbers start to pop out. You got sections of the locker room, 140 lockers, and if all of them would have been filled, I guarantee you Nick Saban would have knocked down another room and built 10 more if he could.
Charlie Jones says it's a great move by the Gators, and here's the other thing you got to say, and I agree with you, Charlie. It's a strong move by Florida here, but it's also time to blow the lid off IMG Academy. I don't want to get too deep in the weeds. Some of our audience follows recruiting closely, some of them don't. Florida's had a big drought at IMG. And that's, listen, IMG is such a talented high school program, they're not even allowed to compete for state championships in Florida, okay?
I mean, I think they have 2 teams, don't they?
I think they are about to start 2 teams. I don't know if they started that yet, but I have heard they're going to start fielding 2 teams because literally every single player on the team is a college prospect. Every athlete in the entire school. Did you know this? Every student in the school is an athlete. It's not, there's no sort of theater section. It's all ridiculous. Athletes. The whole school is athletes. And Florida has had a bit of a drought at IMG Academy. That may be Dan Mullen's biggest challenge here is to sort of break that drought.
Listen, and how big of a move, looking back on it, would be bringing in Sanders as a walk-on linebacker, or preferred walk-on linebacker. If that's what opens your pipeline. If you get 1 IMG signature and then 2, and then all of a sudden all these guys are flocking to be a part of this program. I thought that Dan Mullen had a couple of big wins back at signing day. I thought that getting Malik Langum out from under Alabama and a couple of other guys, Jacob Copeland being another another one. I thought those were big wins. But this kind of roster management outside of signing day, I think is a great sign for Gators fans.
Over on YouTube, Cliff Nelson says the better your scout team, the better your defense. We all agree with that. By the way, on the Facebook comment section, you'll notice Mike Johnson throwing a couple comments in there. That may not seem like that big of a deal, but poor Mike, for how many days now has been trying to figure this out?
I think 3 weeks ago I had to bring a different computer in, and then yesterday I finally got a new computer and still couldn't figure out the comment section. But I got a different software thing going on right now, and I'm back at it.
Yeah, for two people who spend their entire life, professionally anyway, communicating through technology, neither one of us knows a rip about any of this stuff.
This thing might as well be a rock sitting in front of me when it comes to maneuvering around. All I know is the Facebook page and the YouTube page, and that's about where I go.
Tyler Mann predicting what we're going to talk about here for topic number 3. He's right on that. That's in the YouTube comment section. So whether you're watching on YouTube or watching on Facebook, we appreciate you weighing in on this today here on SEC Country Live. And speaking of that, let's do item number 3 here on our SEC Country Live first and 10 list. So there's been some reports out there that Terrence Alexander, the graduate transfer defensive back from Stanford, who we've talked about a lot with a connection to LSU, also took a visit to Tennessee. There were some Tennessee sites that were kind of on this. They put that out there. Austin Price puts this out there on social media that the Vols hosted the graduate transfer, Terrence Alexander here. This is a really interesting showdown because, as we said, he's got ties to New Orleans. Tennessee's trying to use those in the recruitment of him. The ties to New Orleans also makes him an important player for LSU here. LSU needs a defensive back after missing on Patrick Surtain for the class of 2018. Jeremy Pruitt just needs players in general. It seems like we got ourselves a little bit of drama here. A battle between Tennessee and LSU for a player that I believe has a chance to step in and really play and contribute. I'm a huge believer in transfer players. I think they're really important parts for teams to sort of finish off their roster. I love the drama of LSU versus Tennessee for Terrence Alexander.
And it couldn't be a bigger deal. And you talk about, listen, we talk about Dan Mullen and open up the pipeline IMG. Could we see a Tennessee from Stanford pipeline with Killer Chris already being added on in Knoxville? When you look at what these two teams already have on the roster and how bad they need DBs and people in the secondary to be able to come in, I mean, the loss of Justin Martin, Emmanuel Mosley, Shaq Wiggins, Rashawn Golden, just those guys off last year's roster. And so when you look at how wanted this guy Terrence Alexander could be in both of these rotations, it's an absolutely huge deal. It's an absolutely huge deal. LSU has to land this guy, and Tennessee almost certainly has to land this guy. I can't wait to see it start to come. Now, Jeremy Pruitt versus Ed Orgeron for a graduate transfer out of Stanford.
And you can look at the two coaches. You can look at Orgeron, you can look at Pruitt, and you can look at reasons why they have to make this happen. Now, in Orgeron's case, I want to repeat again what I said yesterday, that he did good work with the sort of regular transfer market going back to leading up to the start of the 2017 season. You know, Braden Fehoko, the defensive lineman, is going to play this year. Jonathan Giles, the wide receiver, both from Texas Tech, he's going to play this year. But there were some real swings and misses for Orgeron in the class of 2018. That's another reason why this young man, Alexander, is going to be more important. And for Jeremy Pruitt, yes, he did win with J.J. Peterson. That's a guy that people wouldn't have expected, but he missed out on Quay Walker for the class of 2018. That's a guy that at one point in time it looked like might kind of be sewed up in that regard and kind of missed out on him. So you could sort of list some reasons why both Pruitt and Orgeron have some pressure to sort of bring a guy like this in because they both need him on the field.
Yeah, and a lot of you guys are going back and forth in the comment section. Esteban Esteves says LSU is going to land him. Teresa Stewart said he's coming up to Knoxville. And it's like I mentioned, this guy is a big piece of next year. This isn't a Keller Christ or a Madre London. This is hey, we need you on campus. Yeah. We need you to come be a part of this football team right away back in the secondary. And we've mentioned the numbers in the LSU secondary. I just gave you names that were leaving that Tennessee secondary. These are both programs that didn't sign as many DBs as they wanted to in this signing class. So getting a guy like this who's a short-term answer, you only have him for 1 year, and then all of a sudden he's out of the program. You're not signing him long-term. He can come and be a part of this program for 1 year and really try to make a difference.
Mike Simmons on the Facebook comment section says Jeremy Pruitt's will put Tennessee back on the map. It's going to take a few years, but they got to get got to like the guy. Seems like he has a good work ethic. And when it comes to Terrence Alexander, we're talking about here, that's one of those interesting evaluations that he's going to have to make. He's going to have to look in on Jeremy Pruitt at the beginning of his coaching career and say, does this project better than Ed Orgeron? Now, for Alexander, it's only going to be 1 year, so it's almost more like the immediate deal of, okay, Pruitt may look like a better coach, but is he going to be able to materialize anything in his first year on the job? Whereas Orgeron, LSU's got a history of having good defense. Dave Aranda is obviously a really good defensive coordinator. Is the immediate opportunity there for him at a place like LSU better than Tennessee, even if maybe the long-term coaching future predicts better for Jeremy Pruitt?
Yeah, I think Cliff Nelson and Enrique Murillo are having a good back and forth right now on the YouTube page. Cliff says, look, the LSU DB success, the immediate success you could have here, only has a year left, so why not go to a place you want to win immediately when you look at what LSU could possibly do if they do get more members in the secondary. But Enrique has a good point. If you go to Tennessee, guess what? All of a sudden, you might be the best DB on the field. All of a sudden, you're going to stick out a ton more. And if you're trying to get to the NFL, that might be a bigger deal. I love the thought of him going to LSU, plugging in, being a huge part of a team that really tries to make a run. But do you want to get in the ground level at Tennessee where all of a sudden you might be one of the best players on the defense?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to watch. We're going to see how that plays itself out. Cliff Nelson on the YouTube page says the lack of depth at LSU would project to immediate playing time. And when you are one of these grad transfer guys, I mean, you can't deny that's a big part of the process here. I mean, go back to Shaq Wiggins last year for Butch Jones at Tennessee. Wiggins had a hard time getting on the field. And if you're a grad transfer, unless you're going to play for a national championship, you don't want to go somewhere you're not going to play. Now, we see quarterbacks do this sometimes. They transfer, end up not playing. But position players, other guys, they want to be on the field.
Well, listen, I don't think there's a question either one of these schools you go to is he's going to play. I mean, listen, we talked about the Chris Fulton situation a year ago, and I just mentioned the top 4 DBs leaving Tennessee.
Yeah, but I will say at a place like Tennessee where Dave Aranda is such a good defensive coordinator.
LSU.
At a place like LSU where Dave Aranda is such a good defensive coordinator, it's sort of easier to project how you might fit into that because this is a guy who knows his system. That's a guy that's been in place there for a little while. I fully expect that Jeremy Pruitt will have a good defense at Tennessee eventually. But for a first-year head coach bringing on a coordinator working for the very first year at Tennessee, there is just a little more. I'm not telling you he should pick LSU over Tennessee. I'm not. I'm saying there's a perspective in which you can look at this where there is a little more uncertainty at Tennessee than there would be at LSU.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's more immediacy to win. I think the one thing you forget here is look at Jeremy Pruitt's track record with some of these guys in the secondary. Yeah. I mean, he has sent a ton of guys to the NFL. He knows how to coach up some guys in the secondary. Maybe that's something Alexander wants to look at. I mean, for everything Dave Aranda has done extremely well, and obviously $2.5 million defensive coordinator, he's done very well. Jeremy Pruitt might have that edge when he sends that little graphic of, hey, here's who I had at Georgia, here's who I had at Florida State, here's who I had at Alabama. All these guys are making a ton of money right now.
All right, we'll keep getting the comments going throughout the program here on SEC Country Line today. Speaking of Alabama, let's talk about the Alabama Crimson Tide here for a moment. Item number 4 on our SEC Country Line first and 10 list. And it is just a fact that Alabama didn't get everyone that it wanted for its 2018 class, including the December and February signing periods. I think there were a few guys that they felt like they kind of missed out on. Well, in the February version of signing day, Saban made no bones about the fact that they didn't feel like they were done yet. They were still going to try to make their roster better, add guys, bring them in. One of those in particular in Saban's mind was a big-time defensive tackle who might be able to play right away. Here is Saban from February explaining that Alabama still was looking for players.
We're actually hoping to maybe get one more defensive lineman in this class. We feel really good about the 2 guys that we got. Again, we'd probably, if we had our druthers, we'd have got one more guy at that position, and we'll continue to maybe look and evaluate and see if there's somebody out there that would help us.
You and I both talked on the day of signing day. That's audio, but when you watch the Saban video, when he was doing these kinds of comments, he's continually looking over to his SID staff, not knowing who he can mention, not knowing who he can talk about. Pretty clearly, he had the quarterback already in mind. Gardner Minshew, the transfer from East Carolina, they've added in the fold. The defensive tackle, we weren't quite as sure who he might be referencing in regards to that, but maybe now we do have some idea. Chris Kirshner reporting for the Alabama page at SECCountry.com. When it comes to that defensive lineman that Saban might have been referencing, Kirshner says the main name to know right now on the defensive line is Tavita Masika. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but he's an interior lineman from the College of San Mateo in California. Masika, a 6'1", 300-pound prospect, picked up an offer from the Tide earlier this month. Defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi is Musika's primary recruiter. Musika is expected to visit Tuscaloosa in the coming weeks. Date's not been cemented yet, though. From talking with people with knowledge of the team's recruitment of Musika, it would not come as a surprise to see him join the Tide when he visits. We know what's at issue here. Alabama won the national championship again this season, and this has been so true in so many of the Tide's best seasons. because of the dominance of Deshaun Hand, I'm going to add Raekwon Davis' name in the mix there. Dominant on the defensive line. The Georgia interior of its offensive line, they had played great all season long, had trouble with that Alabama defensive front this season. Alabama is not just good, they're typically great along the defensive line. With Deshaun Hand going to the NFL, that's what makes a guy like Musika potentially important here. You want to bring in someone who's physically mature, who could play right away. This is a pretty big story for Alabama, is it not?
Yeah, it definitely is. And usually when stories like this pop up, you think, oh, man, they're going to add this guy for depth. They want him to be a part of the 3 deep. This is a guy you bring in for bodies. They need him during summer and fall practices. But I got to tell you, I watched the kid's film. I was pretty impressed. This is a junior college All-American, had 42 tackles last year, 6 sacks. He's a guy who can be disruptive. Now, I'm not telling you he's going to come to Alabama and be Raekwon Davis. I'm not telling you he's going to be Isaiah Buggs this year. I'm not even telling you he's going to be Keenan Williams, but I think this guy can be serviceable. And I think when you listen to his words in these articles that obviously Chris Kirschner does a good job, he sounded like shocked that he got an Alabama offer. So getting him on campus will be a big deal here in the next month or so. And he's a guy who could enroll, and I'm not telling you he's going to be a big-time player. Like I said, he's got 3 years to play 2 here coming up. I just think that this is a nice body. You signed Stephon Wynn, you signed Christian Barmore, you signed some other defensive linemen, but this is a guy who's a little bit more mature who can probably play right away.
Kenneth Scott, who's a Florida fan in the comment section, says, yeah, they're going after this JUCO kid because he didn't get Malik Langham, and he gives you the gator emojis and some laughing emojis. So that's a Florida fan having some fun at Alabama's expense. Right
listen, Bobby Brown, Malik Langham, those are 2 people that swung and missed. I mean, that's why Nick Saban's in this situation. They swung and missed on a couple of big recruits, and I got to give credit to Florida. I'll give credit to Texas A&M and Jimbo Fisher. They were able to land those guys when Nick Saban wasn't. That's the reason you see a completely different staff at Alabama right now, and all of a sudden they're sending out tweets and doing all this stuff they haven't done before because they swung and missed on some guys in this cycle.
Travis Burke says, roll tide, we're going to smash the Vols again this year, RTR, and that very well may be true. And I think from a composite standpoint, Alabama is probably still the most talented team in the SEC, probably even a tick ahead of Georgia here. But it is worth pointing out that while the previous classes are all Alabama caliber, the 2018 class was not. As you said, most of the time you bring in a junior college defensive lineman in Alabama, you wouldn't even have room for him. But if you did bring him in, it was for depth only. Because of those open spots left over from the 2018 class, there is a better chance of playing in Alabama right away than you normally think of for the time.
Yeah, there really is. I mean, there's a lot of names there in the 2 and 3 deep that you just, usually listen. It was, for a long time it was Deshaun Hand, who like #1 overall defensive lineman, and all of a sudden he's like stuck behind all these people. Christian Miller was the same way. They kind of get stuck behind some of these guys, and so you don't really have those right now. I got to agree with you. You talk about Johnny Dwight. That's who's going to be the backup nose guard this year. Keenan Williams is going to be relied on a ton. LeBrian Ray, a guy who cracked it a little bit last year. These are guys that are going to be relied on that just aren't those big of names, aren't those huge #1 caliber guys. And so you're right, bringing in the guys and developing guys such as Tavita Musika is going to be a big deal for this team.
You've commented like 15 times on both Facebook and YouTube. Do you listen to anything I say?
I'm trying to reach out to
people. Am I just talking to myself?
I'm trying to reach out to the people. Listen, I didn't.
It's like every time I look down the comments, I see, there's Mike Johnson. That's this guy.
The truth of the matter is this. You weren't here last week, and so I got to talk more than I ever have. Hey, listen, you always butt me out of the conversation.
Maybe I'll just go home then.
But so I didn't get to comment much last week. I got to talk more than I ever have, and I got to tell them how I feel. Now I got to do it through Facebook and through YouTube.
That feels like a backhanded compliment. I don't even know how to take that. What Mike is commenting on in the comment section. You could read some of these on the air instead of having your own private conversation. We are trying to do a show
here. Me and Cliff are talking about the DB wide receiver matchup.
Cliff Nelson on YouTube says, Mike, I'm more interested in seeing Bama's young defensive backs go up against that new LSU 4 wide receiver sets. That's going to be fun. That's content for the show. You're there, direct messaging Cliff. How about
I got to respond to you because you're talking. Why Cliff's saying I can do 2 at once.
So what do you think about what Cliff says about the idea of those Alabama defensive backs being challenged, not just by LSU but other SEC teams?
Well, the reason this pops up is because Cliff brought this up yesterday. We're talking about the lack of DBs at LSU, and talking about Dave Aranda's got this new set where he has 3 safeties on the field, and they kind of go nickel with 3 safeties in there. And I told him that's not going to be a good matchup for LSU. They're going 3 safeties on Bama's 4 wide receivers. I don't see how that turns out being a good thing. And then he says, you convert 1 safety to nickel and you go 5 wide and all that. He kind of went the other way around and said, listen, I want to see some of Bama's young DBs cover these LSU wide receivers. And I think it's the same way around. I mean, you talk about Savion Smith, who was the JUCO guy that transferred over from LSU. A guy in Patrick Surtain Jr., who's going to see a ton of playing time next year. Trevon Diggs. There's a ton of youth in Bama's secondary as well. And so those are good matchups both ways.
All right, let me do item number, 5 here on SEC Country Live, our 1st and 10 list. Now, if we were the kind of show that did like prepping and preparing, I would already know this in advance, but Did you see the Jeremy Pruitt interview where they asked him about all his favorite things?
I did not. I had
Okay,
not
so
seen
you don't know his answer.
Yeah, I heard you listening to it
Okay, so you
earlier.
don't know his answer. So I'm going to play some of the audio where he was asked by a local Knoxville reporter about some of his favorite things. Let me see if you can guess a few of these before we do it.
All right.
What do you think Pruitt's favorite music is?
Oh my God, there's. I would assume it's country music.
He did say country. I was a little surprised that he didn't say something he thought recruits would like,
Right.
but he did say country. What do you think his specific favorite musical act is? Group.
It's probably Alabama.
It is Alabama. He did say that.
'Cause he's from Fort Payne.
He did say that. All right. A couple more. Let me let you, before you spoil all this, let me let you hear.
I'm feeling good right now.
Yeah.
2 for 2.
So Jeremy Pruitt's asked by a Knoxville TV station. It's like a sit-down interview. Before they get into the football stuff, some of your favorite things. Well, Pruitt gave some of his answers. Some of these are just sort of too football coach for words here. Take a listen to this.
What's your favorite movie?
Tombstone.
Favorite type of music?
Country.
Favorite band or singer?
Alabama.
Favorite vacation spot?
Gatlinburg.
Are you a night owl or an early riser?
Both.
Favorite food?
Cornbread.
So a
Wow.
couple things there. Hey, I could totally see Jeremy Pruitt being a big cornbread guy, but there are two things I have a real problem with. When he's asked about the idea of are you a night owl or an early bird, I was trying to think before he answered it, what's the most football answer he can give here?
Right, yeah.
The fact that he says both is the most football coach answer of all
It
time.
really is.
It almost unseats Will Muschamp, who was famous for saying that Thanksgiving's a meal, not a day.
Right.
Pruitt saying he's both a night owl and an early bird. That means he's wise and he gets worms, to borrow a line from The Office. That's a very football coach thing to say.
By the way, Will Muschamp, you can tell Will Muschamp is more comfortable in that role answering questions like that. Jeremy Pruitt's kind of mumbling on Alabama, both.
Yeah.
You know, he's kind of giving it the slow, like, listen, I'm new here. I'm not sure what you're trying to get out of me, but I'm just.
The one I've got to throw a flag on is, do you really, and this is not a shot at the town, do you really believe that Jeremy Pruitt's favorite vacation spot is Gatlinburg?
Gatlinburg, Tennessee. Yeah, I mean, listen, that was probably the right answer. I think that. I'm sure he went to Destin a ton when he was in Tallahassee.
But my point is this feels like one of those things
Oconee.
of, let me try to think of a vacation
Right,
destination that's in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah.
I feel like this is Jeremy Pruitt trying to like summon actual human emotion. He's trying to think, where do humans go on vacation? Oh,
Right.
Gatlinburg's the place that I've heard of. That's in Tennessee. I don't think Jeremy Pruitt's ever been on vacation.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because like I said, while every SEC coach, I mean, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, everybody's going to Destin, everybody's going to Lake Oconee. You know, Nick Saban's got his lake house, and he busts out to Gatlinburg, which is what 45 minutes down the road from Knoxville, Tennessee.
He's not
Pigeon
been to
Forge.
Gatlinburg.
I know, that's my point. That's my point. He probably hadn't even
Well,
been
we
there.
got thousands of people that watch this show every day. If I challenge the entire listening audience or viewing audience to say, find me a picture of Jeremy Pruitt in Gatlinburg, you're not going to find a picture of Jeremy Pruitt in Gatlinburg.
I don't think so either. I think that's definitely one you can be chalked up to. But listen, he had to correct over it because, you know, he asked what his favorite band is. Alabama. I mean, come on, that's
a tough
he has
answer to give in
correct
Tennessee.
that. He's from Fort Payne, so I knew exactly.
Oh,
where
he is from Fort Payne, Alabama.
yeah,
That's
so
actually the home of the group.
of Alabama, right? So I knew exactly where he was probably going to go for that one.
Tombstone, the '90s cowboy movie. I can kind of buy that.
I saw it about 2 months ago.
Yeah, he's not been to Gatlinburg.
I was late to the party.
As this sort of process of getting to know Jeremy Pruitt continues, the local interview there at the Knoxville TV station. Also this week at the Tennessee Pro Day, a lot of the Vols on the way to the NFL were asked, you didn't play for Jeremy Pruitt, but he got a chance to get to know Jeremy Pruitt at all. One of those guys, our Mike Griffith from SECCountry.com, caught up with. Here is Mike with Ethan Wolf, the former Vol tight end, about his early impressions of Jeremy Pruitt. Take a listen.
You crossed paths with Jeremy Pruitt yet, Ethan?
I just did for the first time. Met
What
him.
was your first impression of the new coach? there?
You know, he's a football coach, that's for sure. You know, you can see it in the way, you know, just everything about him. And told me to get on my brother and tell him to put some weight on. So, I think he's going to really help this program.
Teresa Stewart in the comment section, she's a big Vol fan. She says, Pruitt hit the ground running. Our fans are loving what we're hearing about the first day of spring practice. Orange-White games, April 21st. Go Big Orange. And yes, Mr. Stewart was windy, LOL. You go ahead and talk. Oh, that's a reference to last week. Come on, Teresa. You kind of caught me off
I don't
guard.
think you knew what she was going to say.
You kind of caught me off. You kind of caught me off guard. I thought it was talking about her husband, Mr. Stewart.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know, that's an example of just like Ethan Wolf is impressed.
Yep.
He's talking about his brother who's still in the program. Teresa Stewart's impressed. people like what Jeremy Pruitt's bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And I love Ethan Wolf's description here of that guy is a football coach. That's why I don't believe he's ever been on vacation.
Yeah.
I don't believe he has a favorite food. I believe his favorite food is football.
Yeah.
His favorite vacation destination is the film room.
Yeah.
I mean, he is a guy who sort of eats and drinks and lives and breathes this stuff, which is for Tennessee what they need right now.
Well, I think it's definitely what they need, but I got to tell you, how many times have we talked about Will Muschamp and said, boy, he seems comfortable. You know, he seems like exactly what South Carolina needs. He seems comfortable in that role.
Jeremy Pruitt does not seem quite as
He's
comfortable.
not going to be comfortable for a long time until they can win, 9 or 10 games. Jeremy Pruitt's not going to be comfortable, and he probably, even after that, until they make it back to an SEC championship game, won't be comfortable either. I think he's seen what's going on before he got to Tennessee. He's seen it firsthand, being at Alabama and being at Georgia. He's seen what's happened at Tennessee before he got there. He's not going to be comfortable for quite some time, and I think that's actually good news for Tennessee fans, that he is kind of locked and loaded, and he's got his mind on one thing.
By the way, not to get too deep in the weeds here, but Cliff Nelson, longtime Facebook commenter here on SEC Country Live, his migration to the YouTube page is very controversial.
Is it?
There are a lot of people on Facebook who are having some fun at Cliff's expense,
Oh, no,
downright upset with him.
Let me kick over
Cliff
there.
moving from Facebook to YouTube has been met with a lot of controversy. A lot of controversy.
I can only imagine because, listen, and it's going to go back and forth at times, and I think it's kind of funny to see who's on YouTube, who's on Facebook, but I'm trying to hit both at the same time and make sure I get everybody's comments.
Greg Steele, who's a Florida fan, kind of mocking the idea of Jeremy Pruitt liking Alabama. He says, you know what, Jim McElwain talked a lot about old music too. But here's the thing about that, though. Would it be better if he liked Migos or something like that? Because that's what recruits like. I guess authentically it would be better. But the worst thing in the world are these guys who try to pretend to be cool who are not.
Oh, no doubt.
Like, I gave that up a long time ago. That's why I act like such a dork now, because I finally realized it wasn't even worth trying.
Listen, I think the one thing you have to learn if you're a football coach, and it's probably like this and being any kind of sports broadcasting, don't lie about what you are. Somebody will seek you out, and somebody will call you a bluff, and somebody will call you a liar, and that's exactly what they would have done if Jeremy Pruitt would have said Migos.
Real quickly here, too, Shadow Treadway in the comment section mentions the idea of the asparagus. So here's the truth. I only barely remember this, but there was a thing that came up with Pruitt a few years ago, back when he was at Georgia, about he didn't know what asparagus was. Never heard of asparagus.
Oh no, it was from the MTV show.
Okay, so that's what it was.
Yeah.
So I don't 100% know the story, although
God.
I'm sort of like tangentially aware of it.
Yeah, it was on the MTV show Two-A-Days, and I had actually had a few teammates that were on that show back in Hoover, Alabama, and he's eating this nice like Ruth's Chris style of dinner. He looks at the plate and goes, "What's that?" You know what I mean? And boy, I mean when this guy
actually a pretty good Pruitt.
I got to tell you right now, when Jerry Pruitt showed up to Alabama to be, he had an office in the weight room. He was an intern basically. When he showed up to Alabama, that's all I knew of him. He was known as the defensive coordinator at Hoover that was telling his players he couldn't wear, who could wear socks, who could wear their uniforms a certain way. And this guy's going to show up in our weight room and coach college now.
Once again from Teresa Stewart, she swears that he just went to Gatlinburg. He took his son. Will Scott is not sure he agrees. He says that Pruitt couldn't find Gatlinburg on a map. I sort of find myself leaning in the direction of Will Scott on this, but I guess I'll have to take Teresa's word. She is a Tennessee fan after all. We'll get back to our SEC Country Live First and 10 here in just a moment. Before that, let me remind you, we are coming up on the end of the week. There's going to be a lot of hardwood action, a lot of round ball action, kind of getting back going. Again, that means an opportunity for many of you to become a winner. Do more than just have an opinion about the game. Actually put your money where your mouth is and play with the pros play at mybookie.ag. Whether it be the money line, the point spreads, the over-unders, in-game wagering, they offer that for you at mybookie.ag. You can be a big winner right there, and you can be a winner before the wagering even begins when your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. But you've got to use the promo code SECLive to make that happen. The promo code, once again, SECLive. Your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. Just go to mybookie.ag. You play, you win, you get paid. It's as simple as that at MyBookie. MyBookie.ag. Make sure you use the promo code SECLive, and your first deposit can be matched up to 50%. All right, let's get back to our SEC Country Live First and 10 list. Let's take a look at the Georgia Bulldogs here for a moment, who we mentioned off the top of the show, just like Alabama, started spring practice today. Now, for a lot of these teams, you don't find out a lot during the spring what the season's actually going to look like. But that doesn't keep us from speculating. And there's some speculation around Georgia that with Jake Fromm a year older, with Nick Chubb, Sony Michel on their way out of the program, maybe this is a more, I don't want to say air raid Georgia offense, but maybe it goes to the air a little more given the sort of new balance of talent within the offensive outlook here. One of the guys who thinks that might be true is Terrence Edwards, the former Georgia receiver who was great for the Dogs in the early 2000s. We had a chance to catch up with him as a part of our Dog Nation Appreciation event in Georgia last week. Here is Edwards with a little hip-hop vibe underneath him, explaining why he thinks that maybe the Georgia offense opens it up a little more in 2018.
I think it'll open up once you trust the quarterback, as I think they trust Jake now. I mean, you think about it, we had two freshmen in consecutive years to play starting quarterback for us. So we have Jake has a chance to be special, and I think they understand that. They will open it up more, but our backs we have, you can't leave them out. I mean, with Zeus coming in.
So he talks about Zeus, that's Demir White, the nation's #1 running back. But the larger point that he makes there is when you've got Jake Fromm, who, and it's a great point to point out, unless something really weird happens this spring for the first time since 24, maybe you have to go back 2013, I guess. This will be the first time since 2013 that Georgia hasn't had a new starting quarterback. You know, it's Hudson Mason, it's Grayson Lambert, it's Jacob Eason 2016. It's Fromm last season. Georgia bringing back a returning starter for the first time since Aaron Murray was in Athens. And Terrence Edwards says maybe that's an opportunity to open up the offense a little more and throw it a little more. Do you think that Terrence Edwards, he's a wide receiver, he's probably a little biased, but do you think his prediction's correct?
He wants the ball out wide, doesn't he?
Sure he does.
And by the way, how did the Dog Nation event go? I saw that you were signing some autographs. I saw some on Twitter. BA was signing autographs. Signing autographs, making sure everybody's happy.
Hannah now,
signed more autographs than Nick Chubb did.
She's on the other side over there. She's the one that's signing autographs.
The event went good, though.
We had a great time. Listen, for those of you who don't know, I do Dog Nation Daily every single day. We were lucky enough last week to be able to celebrate the end of the Georgia season with Nick Chubb, Sony Michel, Roquan Smith, Davin Bellamy, Lorenzo Carter. We had a big event honoring all of them. If you're not a Georgia fan, it was just as terrible as you think it would have been. But if you were a Georgia fan, I would hope you think it was a pretty good night because we all had a really good time doing it.
Yeah, I forgot to buy my ticket and show up, but I'll catch the next one for sure, the next year's Dog Nation Appreciation. But yeah, going back to what the topic is originally on, I do like this topic, and I actually do agree with him here because, listen, I think this is a natural evolution of things where you get the ball in the hands of guys that know the system and have been around, and obviously you feel good about DeAndre Swift, you feel good about Elijah Holyfield, you feel good about Zeus coming in there, but when you look at the names, I mean, I fully expected Terry Godwin, McCole Hardman, and Riley Ridley after the championship game. You're talking about three pretty good guys. Add in J.J. Holloman and Trey Blunt, Matt Landers, and all these guys that are going to be in this wide receiver core. I don't have any reason to think they won't spread the ball around more. Jake Fromm, they allowed him with this rushing offense last year to ease into his role on this football team. They didn't ask him to do a ton early. Towards the end of the season, you could see the uptick in throws. You could see the uptick in Jake Fromm making some of these decisions at the line of scrimmage. I think they put more on him this year. I don't think there's any doubt in my mind that you go out with this offensive line that you should have talent-wise in front of him, and the talent-wise that you're going to have out wide, and ask him to make some of these throws into these wide receivers and make a more explosive, even more explosive passing game than it was last year.
Patrick Brown says Dogs should go 12-0. Back-to-back champs. Refs won't hold them back from a national championship this year. That's Patrick Brown who said that, not me. Don't even need to open up the offense for that. So Patrick Brown says you don't even need to open up the offense. It's going to be fine for Georgia this season. But from my perspective, when it comes to opening up the Georgia offense, here's the one problem I think you're going to have. You reference some wide receivers. Terry Godwin is a really good player. McCole Hardman's a really good player. But they're more athletes than natural wide receivers.
Right.
I think they've been trained to play the wide receiver position, but I don't know that they're naturals at that position. Georgia's got the commitments right now for 2019 from the nation's #1 and #2 wide receiver. That's what Georgia really needs. As it stands right now, Georgia is championship good at several position groups. I think wide receiver may be just south of being championship good. One of the interesting things to see is going to be, though, can Jake Fromm, who I do think is a year older and gets a year better, can he make some of these wide receivers better now? If so, then Georgia can throw it more. But I do believe that the strength of Georgia's team when it comes to skill position guys is still the running backs, probably tight end. I don't quite think wide receivers in that group yet.
I don't know that it is, and obviously we're going to learn that as we go on and watch this Georgia football team. But I think the problem, I can't remember who you just said had that comment about they shouldn't need to open it up more. They should be fine as is. Listen,
Patrick Brown.
Listen, I'm not going to lie to you. I lived and died by that last year. We don't need, Jalen Hurts is fine at quarterback. We don't need Tua coming off the bench. We don't need this passing game. Until you do. Until you get in those situations where all of a sudden you can't run the ball and you're not effective up front. And they're doing something with their offensive front where they're switching right before the snap. And all of a sudden it's got your offensive line's head in a jumble. Then you need to throw the ball. Then you need to put it on Jake Fromm. And so I think that's the natural progression. Obviously, like you said, you don't know if the wide receiver core is there yet. But I think that Jake Fromm is there. And I think that his ability to kind of lead this offense is going to tell you the tale of what you need in the passing game.
But as a, for instance, based on how Alabama's wide receivers looked last year, Georgia's wide receivers this year, compared to Alabama from a year ago or Alabama right now, the Georgia receivers are nowhere near as good as the Alabama wide receivers. They're not, Alabama has an underrated group of wide receivers. I don't think that Georgia's wide receivers are problematic, but they're not great.
Right. No, I agree with you. I agree with that point. But I guess what I'm just trying to say is this has to be something that happens. I think that you get to these points, and Georgia didn't have it a ton last year, but you did have it a little bit in the national championship game. You did have it at the end of the year when you went on the road and played Auburn, where you could have used more explosive plays. You could have used more throws. You didn't realize that you really needed it, I don't think, until right there at the end of the year, and then all of a sudden Jake Fromm picks up steam and starts making them. I think that Jake Fromm is good enough, and it's all respect to Justin Fields and all this quarterback competition talk. Jake Fromm is good enough to where he can push some of these guys to be a little bit better than they are. Get it to open space, allow these guys to make moves and get up the field, and I think that that's how this becomes a bigger part of the game plan.
Cliff Nelson, also on the subject of Georgia, says DeAndre Swift's going to be a beast, and yeah, with a running back like that, Swift coming into a sophomore year, the expectation is Georgia's still going to want to lean on him some. That is certainly true. Shannon Burgess, by the way, says that he's a guy that likes to toggle back and forth between both comment sections, YouTube and Facebook. Listen, we love the idea of doing that as well. Check them out on both sides. There are slightly different experiences, I would say, probably.
I think so. I definitely think so. I think that both groups probably bring a little bit more to the table in different areas. I'm not going to go into what exactly both groups are doing, but I'm happy to be back on both pages as well, because obviously I have Facebook up and running now with the new computer.
Morgan Rectian, who is a Florida fan, weighing in on Georgia, says Georgia's going to be stout, but there are going to be some holes in leadership spots to fill. Not sure it's going to be a seamless transition as many think, but they're still going to be pretty dang good. So I agree with almost everything that Morgan's saying there. I'm going to assume that the overall talent composite being raised may be enough to offset some leadership losses, but there's no doubt there's some leadership losses. The guys we just mentioned, the ones we had at Dog Nation Appreciation last week, were all dang good leaders.
Yeah.
Davin and Lorenzo on defense, along with Roquan, Sony and Nick on offense, among others, Isaiah Wynn, the left tackle. They were terrific leaders, and from a leadership standpoint, like all the SEC teams deal with, there's a void that has to be filled there.
I agree with you, and it's tougher than I think a lot of people realize, and you mentioned it. Because we talked about this last year. You have to have guys that are talented and that are willing to be vocal. And it's hard to just cultivate that. You have teams that it seems like they just come up with leaders and these alpha dogs and these guys every other year, but it is hard to cultivate that. It's hard to just reach down into the roster and say, boy, this guy's going to be a leader, or boy, that guy's going to be a leader. That's why I love what Dan Mullen's doing down in Florida right now, kind of picking these 8 captains that kind of draft their own players. I thought that was a really cool example of what you should do.
By the way, Trey Dukes is upset because I was too critical of the Georgia receivers, at least in his mind, but you understand where I'm coming from on this. Look, Georgia's trying to get to a point where all of its position groups are championship level, but, Kirby Smart's only had 3 recruiting classes. They're not all championship level yet.
Right, and listen, I kind of based my assessment off what I saw when Georgia faced off with Alabama. I saw guys that were making explosive plays. Riley Ridley, that's not even a guy who was in my mind going to the national championship game. All of a sudden, this guy, Boston Lacine, has a couple of huge explosive catches. I've also heard a ton about this young guy, Trey Blunt, that's entering in the program. I think a lot of people feel really good about what he could possibly bring to that position group.
One other thing, too, Brian Wright in the comment section says, have y'all seen the amount of talent on Georgia's offensive line? Here's the one thing I am really high on. It has been a long time, as you said, Georgia's offensive line was a true strength. Last year it was good. Previous years maybe it was okay. This may be a great offensive line this year for Georgia, and that's something I think the Dog fans get real excited about.
No, listen, we covered it last week a little bit. You talk about almost an embarrassment of riches at that right tackle spot of who could possibly take over that. And, you mentioned it. You've said this about Alabama a couple times. One 5-star goes out, you plug another one in, you can move them around, you can move one to guard, move one to left tackle. That's what they've got going on right now at their offensive line. A very serviceable unit from last year, returning 4 starters, have that kind of ability to get back into those roles and kind of push forward and become even better than they were a year ago.
Let's talk about the other Bulldogs in the SEC here for a moment. Item number 7 on our SEC Country Line First in 10 list. The Solid Verbal is a podcast that talks about college football, and they recently were lucky enough to have the Mississippi State coach Joe Moorhead on the scene for them. And Moorhead, who was a sharp offensive mind going back to his time at Penn State as offensive coordinator, kind of talked about one of his philosophies for a part of the offense that's very prominent in his play calling. That's those RPO, run-pass options. Here is Moorhead's explanation for how he likes to sprinkle the RPO into what he does with his play calling.
People kind of assume that it has something to do with throwing the ball, and in a way it does. But to me, the run-pass option or adding tags is a way to neutralize defensive numbers, because to me the run game comes down to 3 things: numbers, angles, and grass. Where are the best numbers? Where are the best angles for your blockers? And how do you get your speed into open space? And I think the thing with the the tags and the RPOs and post-snap reading second and third level defenders, it allows you to throw the ball if the 7th or 8th defender is able to tackle the ball carrier if you hand them off. And if he isn't, you're able to hand the ball off and you're blocking 6 for 6 or 5 for 5. So, I think that's one of the reasons, Saquon, Chase Edmonds before that at Fordham, and even going back to Jordan Todman, Dennis Kennedy at Akron, that we've had running backs who've either led the league or been, in the top 2 in rushing, because we don't hand the ball off to our backs when there's people at the line of scrimmage we can't block.
In that same interview with the Solid Verbal, Moorhead would go on to say that his nickname for his offense, he kind of calls it the Chipotle offense, the reference to the fast food Mexican joint. He says, we don't have a ton of ingredients, but we mix it in a lot of different ways, have a lot of different combinations. And I got to tell you, I sort of like that description. You can check out the full interview at Solid Verbal.
Yeah, it was good.
But I sort of like that description. I like it a lot better than Derek Dooley's Wikipedia offense at Missouri. I still think that sometimes we put a little too much faith in knowledge as opposed to just hard work when it comes to coaching and going in and bringing players. But Moorhead's explanation of his RPOs there and the whole idea of the Chipotle offense, I got to tell you, I don't mind that description. I thought it was kind of interesting.
It did. I'm telling you, the whole interview actually made me want to jump on board a little bit more with Joe Moorhead. I mean, he talks about the transition from assistant coach to head coach. He said assistants make suggestions, head coaches make decisions.
That's good.
I loved it. No, I thought he was great in this interview. When you look at the talent he's got coming back, 10 returning starters on offense, he's got all the ingredients there. I think that's what he's so excited about when you look at the fact that really you're only losing Martinez Rankin, who is a big loss for this offense, but you're getting a couple of quality starters back. You add the JUCO wide receiver Stephen Guidry to really take the top off these defenses, and he should feel good about the ingredients they have there without a doubt. I know that Nick Fitzgerald has a ways to come back, but the guys that they're going to have on the field next fall for that offense, I think they'll be explosive.
Esteban Esteves, by the way, in the Facebook comment section says he loves Chipotle, so he likes that comparison there for the Mississippi State coach. Even though his team, LSU, is going to play Mississippi State, he does like the comparison there for Joe Moorhead. And follow me on this for a minute if you don't mind. Have you ever heard it said before that the highest level of understanding is the ability to teach to somebody else?
Right.
One of the things I do think is kind of impressive about Moorhead here is his effortless ability to sort of explain his offensive philosophy within the confines of this interview here, where a lot of guys, they know their stuff, but they don't really know it well enough to sort of make it conversational for other people. But Moorhead's got no problem sort of spitting out his philosophy here, which does make you kind of said you're kind of more in on him now after hearing this interview.
It's endearing. It's
a little easier for me to believe that he really is a football genius when you hear him talking about his stuff.
Yeah, no, I think it's endearing. It's Joe Moorhead is a guy who, when he was hired at Mississippi State, I'm going to Wikipedia and going, who is Joe Moorhead?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know anything about this guy, but you wonder, a guy from Fordham and a guy who's been at Penn State, how does that transfer over to a place like Starkville, Mississippi? But I think he's done it seamlessly. I think that really, in a short amount of time, Mississippi State fans have been able to get behind him. Now, a lot of that has to do with the fact that you get, 18 or 19 starters back off last year's team, including Nick Fitzgerald, and Keaton Thompson looked pretty good in the bowl game. So I think a lot of that has to do with that. But I think that the more and more Mississippi State fans I talk to, and Brandon Walker hasn't shut up about him in a couple of months, they love what Joe Moorhead is bringing to this program.
By the way, if you've never checked out More Cowbell, it is our Mississippi State podcast here on SEC Country. Brandon Walker does a good job doing that. I know they're all in his audience very excited about the future of Joe Moorhead as Mississippi State coach. Let's do item number 8 here on our SEC Country Line First and 10 list. And when Alabama played Tennessee, we spent some time in the week after the game talking about, I would think, kind of an unfortunate incident for Rashawn Golden, the Tennessee player who kind of showed the double obscene gesture, the double birds to Alabama fans. Not a pretty sight. Golden obviously regrets having done that. He got some negative attention for that. Even guys like Kirk Herbstreit and others kind of sort of laid in on him
really did.
on that. Well, now Golden's getting ready to go to the NFL. We just talked about Tennessee's Pro Day a few minutes ago here on SEC Country Live, and when reporters gathered around Golden, they asked him, hey, how does what you did to the Alabama fans in terms of flipping them the bird, how does it impact your status with NFL teams? And Golden was pretty direct with his answer. Here was the former Vol, Rashawn Golden, on his feelings about Alabama.
I mean, most of the teams asked me about it, and I came at them with the same answer. I mean, I'm a very, very passionate guy when I step on the field. I hate Alabama, and I mean that's just how it is. But at the same time, I know that there's no place in sports for that kind of thing to happen, and I obviously don't want to be remembered that way at Tennessee. I feel like I've made a lot of plays, and different things like that. So that's not how I want to be remembered. But I'm going to have to live with it. I definitely have matured since then.
So when you listen to Golden there, my takeaway on this is the flipping of the bird. There's a chance that may reflect on him poorly as a person, but I don't know that it reflects on him poorly as a football player. What I mean by this is, if it had been my son that was doing it, I'd be pretty disappointed that my son sort of did that in such a public forum. But it doesn't make him worse of a football player. It doesn't make him undraftable or even like a red flag on draft night. This is probably people who do what I do for a living, and football scouts are always looking to downgrade guys for whatever reason because it makes them seem smart. This is us nitpicking something that probably has very little to do with how good of a football player he might be.
In the same breath, I wonder if it was embarrassing for a lot of Tennessee fans, because I feel like, when you're up in Knoxville, people, listen, that's a program that has a ton of pride in the way they expect people to act when they're wearing that orange on Saturdays. And so I kind of, honestly, listening to him, I don't want to say I understand, because obviously I would have never done anything like that. I never did anything like that during my career. But I understand where he's coming from. I mean, you're talking about a year for Tennessee in which you were not playing well. I think it had been, I read the article earlier, it had been like 4 weeks, maybe 28 days since they had scored their last touchdown. Got shut out by Georgia, kicked 3 field goals against South Carolina. That was a pick six at the end of the game off of Tua Tagovailoa, and you're just like, you know what? I'm about to lose my mind because we finally scored a touchdown for the first time in a month. And so I think that tells you where he was mentally. Bush Jones ends up being fired. Terrible year for Tennessee. And Rashawn Golden in that one moment just felt the need to lash out.
By the way, Vols fan Tom says if Pruitt wins 6 games this season, I'm going to be happy. So that gives you an idea of kind of the feeling around the Tennessee program going by that game against Alabama. But here's the one thing that I do want to say about this, and this is what's, I think, sort of unfortunate for Tennessee fans, is what Rashawn Golden is saying there is what you need to hear more people saying in this rivalry, and frankly about Alabama in particular. You had Pat Dye last season suggesting that Auburn should stop playing Alabama. You had the one columnist up in Tennessee that suggested the same thing about the Vols. At least Rashawn Golden is sort of bringing this back where it's supposed to be, that this is supposed to be a program you're supposed to hate.
Right.
You're supposed to sort of enjoy competing with, not look for some way to try to avoid here. So I actually like the fact that Rashawn Golden is going to be full-throated in his belief of, I hate Alabama and I want to show that on the football field. I think that what we would all say is, just try to find a different way to show it.
Yeah, that's the way it is. And you mentioned Kirk Herbstreit. I mean, Rashawn Golden went back at Kirk Herbstreit because Kirk Herbstreit's talking about Baker Mayfield grabbing his crotch, saying, boy, I love the competitiveness. I think he just misunderstood. Rashawn Golden's like, you said I should have been kicked off the team.
Good for Golden on that.
I mean, good for Golden for going back at him, because I think it is misconstrued. It was a one-time thing. Obviously, he got emotional about it. I didn't love it. Listen, he flipped off Alabama fans. I'm an Alabama fan. I was like, hey, this Tennessee guy needs to go. But at the same time, I understand where he's at mentally to where you're just letting it out all of a sudden.
Am I like an old fuddy-duddy for saying this? I'd rather you fight than flip somebody on the bird.
Yeah, you might be an old fuddy-duddy.
For some reason, I just don't like a guy in uniform flipping the bird. I'd rather you fight. Obviously in your helmet, if you're cursing, nobody can tell where you're going. It's not a good, like, does that make me like an old, I mean, you're a decade younger than me.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do you understand where I'm coming from? I think flipping the bird in uniform is a really bad look.
I just think fighting in college football is an absolute no-no. It's a no-no at any level of football, but when's the last time you've seen college? I mean, it's been a couple of years since you've seen a college football player going to fight. I've seen a couple of birds. I think it's just, you're not putting physical violence on anybody. You're just kind of making an obscene gesture.
Item number 9 on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. So there was a story at SECCountry.com. I think we can actually show you some of the story, that a pair of Kentucky super fans have a child. Their last name is Perry. They like the name Callie. They had, I guess, seen somebody on TV whose name was Callie. And so the decision was made here, how about name the child Callie Perry? Well, there's only one thing about this, is that also sort of coincides with John Calipari, the Kentucky coach's name. You saw there on the story, Calipari found out about the baby named Callie Perry, signed the autograph for Callie there. What do you think about the name Callie Perry for a child?
I absolutely hate this. I mean, listen, I understand why you do it, and I understand. Listen, you're a huge fan. There's
cute kid, by the way.
Can't tell you how
Super
many
cute
kids.
kid.
I told you this before. There is literally a convention in Tuscaloosa for kids that were named after Bear Bryant. For people that were named after Bear Bryant, it's a convention every year in Tuscaloosa. It's absolutely hilarious. But this is a head coach, and this is a guy and John Calipari, who has been to 2 schools where some questionable stuff go on. So if you're going to name your kid after a guy like that, think about it. Listen, if you're going to name your kid after Rick Pitino, I mean, you are.
Well, there's actually a quote in the story. Our buddy Kyle Tucker is the one who wrote this, and he talked to the guy who named his daughter Callie Perry, and he said, what if Cal were to leave and go to Louisville like Rick Pitino did? And the guy said, listen, as long as he doesn't get us put on probation, everything's fine. I'm thinking, oh my gosh,
that might be a concern.
Yeah, I mean, that's not like some way on the other side of the rainbow possibility for Kentucky.
At this day and age in college basketball, with the FBI sticking its nose in everywhere, you're telling me you feel good about naming your kid Calipari. I'm just telling you, I wouldn't even name my kid Avery after Avery Johnson. I wouldn't go there. I'm just telling you.
It's a risky move, man.
I feel
like naming your children after anyone who's still living, there's some.
I wouldn't even name my kid Saban. I wouldn't do it. I just think it's too risky to where, you name your kid after Joe Paterno, all of a sudden it's bad news too. You go down that road and then all of a sudden statues are coming down, nameplates are being ripped off Hall of Fames. It's just, you never know what's going to come out.
I mean, you name your child Saban, he can't see his reflection in the mirror. I mean, there's all kinds of problems that kind of come up when you start naming.
He's got to wear the platform shoes. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Boy, that's good stuff.
All right, speaking of babies, let's do item number 10 here on our SEC Country Life First and 10 list. And congratulations are in order. The Malzahn family, as they put out there on Instagram, Gus Malzahn, a grandfather now. I don't know if this is his first grandchild or not, but Christy Malzahn, Malzahn's wife, showing off their brand new grandbaby there on Instagram. And first of all, incredibly cute baby. It looks like a very happy family here. But how jealous am I of this? Malzahn's a grandfather? Look how good he looks to be a granddad.
You're jealous of that? Oh, because he still looks good. I get what you're saying.
No, I'm not ready to be a grandfather, but I feel like Malzahn looks better than me now. My kids are about the age of his grandchildren.
Yeah, no, he is holding it together pretty well.
That's a pretty good job for a granddad.
I'm not going to look at I'm not going to look and call him a good-looking guy, but Gus is holding it together.
I'm not saying he's a good-looking guy. I'm saying he's in good shape. He's bouncing around.
Yeah, listen. There's a couple of coaches like that in the SEC that really, I'm like, man, you really are holding it together. And Gus Malzahn's definitely one of those.
Now, the turtlenecks and the sweater vest he's wearing all the time, that's sort of a grandfather look. So, like, from a fashion standpoint, he's got more in common with granddads, you might think.
Yeah.
But in terms of overall sort of youthful zeal, I mean, like, Malzahn's actually doing pretty well to be a grandfather.
Yeah, you wonder. I mean, like, would he look less? Would he look more like a grandfather if they didn't have the Under Armour contract? Like, if he didn't have Under Armour, would he would see him wearing like white New Balances, working the grill? Like,
I don't think so. I think Malzahn's a young-looking guy.
I don't know.
How old do you think he is?
I think without all the Auburn swag that he's.
Does anybody have any idea how old Malzahn is?
I'm gonna go 57.
50? Think he's that old?
I think he's 57. I have no idea.
He's a good-looking 57, man.
I would guess.
Good for him. Yeah. Good for him. All right, anyway. Here at SEC Country Live, we're always looking to close the show the same way every day. We're always looking for champions of life, and obviously we feel like y'all are all our champions of life for being here on the program each and every day. Well, today our champion of life also comes from the ranks of the SEC. Mississippi State, I guess the winner of a NIT game the other night by virtue of buzzer beater, and in the locker room, quite the celebration unfolded. Take a look at this as captured by one of the players on social media. So you got a little tiny applause here. Then the guy who hits the shot comes in. He just gets pelted by everybody. This is kind of a nice scene, but is this too much celebrating for NIT wins? No,
I don't think so at all. Listen, man, those guys, it doesn't matter where you're at. They fought their butt off to get a win. They're in the SEC school. It doesn't matter who you're playing. I love seeing the emotion no matter where they're at. I'm not gonna go in there and be like, guys, you realize you just won.
I don't think you believe a word of that.
I really do.
I don't think you believe a word of that.
Listen,
I'm not saying I'm mad at him, but
when we were terrible, like in 06 and 07, we were terrible at football. We weren't terrible at football. We went like 7-6, 6-7. We were still just as happy we won the game, though. Just because we weren't that good of a football team doesn't mean... Like, Vanderbilt's still happy when they win. Sure. Even though they're not headed for an SEC championship game, they still get excited.
Sure. That's Mike Johnson. I'm Brandon Adams. Make sure you check out our podcast. It's available for you every day right after the show on Apple Podcasts, on SoundCloud, all the various places where you can find podcasts. It'd also be a big help to us if you'd share the show with your friends on YouTube or on Facebook. Let them know that even during the off-season, every afternoon, Monday through Thursday, we're talking about the SEC right here on SEC Country Live. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for another episode of SEC Country Live.